Welcome everybody back to Stormwater Awareness Week 2021. If you've been here before, a few of you have. My name is Jonah Sonner, and the last workshop that I will be sharing with everybody today is going to be about conditioning construction projects with stormwater requirements. And the purpose of this workshop, I do a lot of plan reviews for municipalities. I do various ones, erosion sediment control plans, stormwater pollution prevention plans, and post-construction plans. And I wanted to be able to give a resource, give a training tool for plan checkers or people who deal with these things that help provide some clarifying information of when certain stormwater plans are required, who needs to submit them, what the triggers are, and what makes a complete submittal. So this is going to be a little bit more dense, so you'll have to stay with me. I will do my best to not make you fall asleep after a big lunch. But with that, let us get some acronyms out of the way. Because what would a stormwater class be if we didn't throw a bunch of acronyms that you didn't know out there? So Erosion Sediment Control Plan is the first one, ESCP. This is pretty much the bread and butter, the one that we're going to be talking about a lot today. A Stormwater Pollution Prevention Plan is another one we're going to be talking about. A SWP, ESCP's SWP, and the last one is a Post-Construction Standards Plan. These go by many names. Sometimes it's just shortened to PSP, or Post-Construction Standards Plan. Do they just drop the C? Or PCSP. But it has also adopted a variety of other names. You can see there. I can remember some of them. And these are region specific. So different regions might have different plan names, like a SWQCCP, a SWPPP, Stormwater Quality Criteria Control Plan, DSP Design Standards Plan, SWDSP Stormwater Design Standards Plan. SUSUMP is for San Joaquin County. C3, that's more for the Bay Area. They're also called post-construction design measures or post-construction control measures. They have a variety of different acronyms, but they all mean the same thing. They are, well, actually, we'll get into the definitions here of what each plan entails on the next slide. So what is each plan for? We have ESCPs, SWPs, post-construction plans. What are they for? Well, an ESCP lists best management practices, BMPs, to control discharges of sediment and other pollutants from construction activity. Pretty straightforward, pretty simple. A SWPP is an ESCP, but it is specifically for larger projects. So ESCP can be interchangeable with the SWPP. They will mean the same thing. A SWPP is an erosion sediment control plan, but a SWPP is generally for a construction general permit coverage. That's what's requiring it, which is for larger projects, projects that are 1 acre or greater. There's an asterisk there because we'll come back to when a plan is required, but they cover the same thing. They have lists of BMPs to control sediment and erosion on a project, as well as other pollutants that might be found on a construction project. But they also established inspection regimens and sampling protocols and maybe post-construction design measures. If you're not within a MS4's jurisdiction, all of those will be talked about and discussed in a SWPP. So an ESCP, the way I differentiated it, it's the bare bones, erosion controls, BMPs, good housekeeping, and a site plan. SWPPs are for larger projects. They are very detailed, and they are for construction general permit or CGP coverage. Now, a post-construction plan, PSP, is more of a planning document. And the post-construction is a bit of a misnomer. A lot of people will see post-construction, and I've had this happen in plan check before, where they think, well, this is post-construction, shouldn't we deal with this after construction? Well, No, it's more of a planning document. You do it with the engineering because these plans list site design measures that are going to be implemented to mitigate stormwater runoff and pollutants from a finished construction site. So it is for the post-construction side of things, but you do the design work before, and you're designing treatment controls, identifying source controls that can be done, maybe site design measures that will help mitigate stormwater runoff and pollution. So all of that has to be done before construction, all done around the same time. Now, as I said, ESCPs and SWPPs are very similar, but they are also likely going to trigger post-construction standards because, as we can see here, ESCPs and SWPPs, they're triggered by soil disturbance. If you're breaking up soil, if you're digging out an area or needing to disturb soil for new construction, that's going to trigger erosion sediment control plan. Makes sense. Post-construction plans are triggered by impervious surface creation or addition, or the replacement of existing impervious surface. So two different types of triggers. One is just disturbing the soil, but the other one is creating, adding new impervious surface or replacing it. So this is why post-construction requirements will likely be triggered along with erosion sediment control plans or SWPPs. They'll go hand in hand. And so I mentioned this before, ESCPs are typically for projects under an acre. So just the small plans, I usually call them small projects, they are for coverages, they cover everything that is not covered by a SWPPP. And depending on your municipality, depending on how your ordinances are set up, it may apply to any project disturbing soil. I know there's some jurisdictions that they have a limit of specific triggers for erosion sediment control plans. So anything above 500 square feet of soil disturbance, you need to submit X, Y, and Z. Anything below that, they might exempt, or they might just have a set of standards saying follow these. It depends, but there is no guidelines in the phase 2 MS4 permits. So any project disturbing soil may need to submit erosion sediment control plans. That's why it goes through a plan check. That's what it's for. And I said SWPPs are typically required for projects that are greater than 1 acre. Erosion sediment control plans, they are, I mentioned this, they are triggered by municipal ordinances, and they are required by the phase 2 MS4 permit. But the SWPPs, we don't require them per se. We're not the ones who permit SWPPs. That's done through the state on their permitting portal, and you need to develop and upload a SWPPP on Smarts pursuant to the construction general permit standards. Now we will still review a SWPPP, but we'll review it to our ordinance only. We're not seeing if it's a good SWPPP meeting all the CGP requirements. We're just looking, does it meet our minimum requirements in our ordinances? Same for ESCPs. Now there's a couple different times when a SWPPP might be required for a project under an acre, or something similar to a SWPPP. There are a few exceptions for waiver projects. It might be it might not be required to have CGP coverage, but still have some erosion sediment control documents. You still need to have a water pollution control plan, for example, if you have a waiver, which is essentially a SWPPP. If you are in a common plan and development, you might have a project that is smaller than an acre, but because it's part of a larger common plan of development, it will be required to have a SWPPP. That comes from the CGP. And there's different types of SWPPs, different risk levels, different linear projects. There's different things that go into determining what kind of SWPPP you need. But we only inspect and review plans according to our municipal ordinances. So we're looking at our BMPs, or the BMPs in a plan being brought to us, saying, do these meet the minimum requirements of our municipal ordinances. So you need to know where to find those and need to know what they are to review them. But that's what triggers SWPPs and ESCPs. Now I said post-construction plans are triggered by impervious surface creation. And there's two types of post-construction plans. And this is where it starts to get a little bit heady. So we find this in section E12B and C of the phase 2 permit. A small project, it's not called a small project, but we call it that. A small project is between 25,000 and 5,000 square feet of new or replaced impervious surface. That triggers small project requirements. Excuse me. A regulated project is anything over 5,000 square feet of new or replaced impervious surface. So that can cover a whole lot of things, especially if your trigger for an ESCP is any soil disturbance. If it's above 5,000 square feet of impervious surface addition, you might need to look at that and say, okay, hey, this might need post-construction standards as well. Especially if you're working with small projects, they might not know the city standards. They might not submit it on the first time around. So something to look out for as they're submitting some basic information or planning is to look for these numbers, these figures. Now, a regulated project covers, as I said, new or replaced. So this also covers new development or redevelopment. And redevelopment is defined as any land disturbing activity that results in creation, addition, or replacement of exterior impervious surfaces. Now, somebody might say, well, does that mean if I get a new roof, that's a new exterior impervious surface? Do I need to design a stormwater runoff control because I replaced my roof? No, there's a lot of exclusions. A lot of them relate to LUPs, but there's, hold on, because there's a lot of exclusions. So what doesn't trigger a plan are detached single-family homes that are not part of a larger common plan of development. They are considered as a small project, even if they exceed 5,000 square feet of impervious surface. And you might think, why is that? We'll get into that a little bit later when we look at what is required of each plan. Projects that are exclusively interior remodels don't need any of this. Routine maintenance or repair of exterior wall surface replacements, pavement grinding and resurfacing. That's usually defined as just taking up the top layer of asphalt and laying it back down. You're not disturbing the subsoil, not disturbing the more than just the first few inches of the surface. That's routine maintenance. Or roofing replacement. There you go. There's your exception. Projects consisting solely of sidewalks or bicycle lanes built as part of new streets or roads and built to direct stormwater runoff to adjacent vegetated areas. They don't need this. They are exempt from that. Projects consisting solely of impervious trails built to direct stormwater to adjacent non-erodible permeable areas. Okay. Projects consisting solely of sidewalks, bicycle lanes, or trails constructed with permeable surfaces. Replacement of damaged pavement or replacement of short non-contiguous sections of roadways, or trenching, excavating, resurfacing associated with LUPs, unless it has a discrete location where they're doing 5,000 square feet or more of new impervious surface. That's not part of the LUP. It's like a maintenance facility or a pump station that might require post-construction standards. And only that section is going to require post-construction standards. So that's a lot. That's a big list, but you can see it generally follows the same idea. Roadways, sidewalks, routine maintenance, LUPs, usually those will be exempt. So if you see any of those in your project planning, you might think, okay, I know that. I think we can skip over those. Or you can go back to the permit and recheck the rules like, yeah, that one's out. We don't need post-construction here. Now, there is another rule with redevelopment. Again, this is a little bit heady, but can be summed up pretty simply. It's called the 50% rule. And this only applies for redevelopment. So if a redevelopment project increases 50% or more of impervious surface than what the existing development was, then you have to treat runoff from the entire project. But if you treat, or if you increase less than 50% of the impervious surface, only the new or replaced impervious surface must be included in the selection of site design measures. That's great. That saves you a lot of work. And so it's something important to keep in mind. 50% of impervious surface added or created. If you see there's a reduction in the overall impervious surface added for a redevelopment project, you might think, oh, that one might only need to treat less area. They might be able to fall into the 50% rule. It only applies to redevelopment projects, but it's something good to keep in mind. Now, for street and road widening projects, the same thing applies. It's very similar wording here. So 50% or more, they need to follow all of the post-construction standards, hydromodification, site design measures, LID design standards, the whole nines. But if it results in an alteration of less than 50% of the impervious surface, only the runoff from the new and or replaced impervious surface area is required to be included in the selection and sizing of site design measures. So those are great tools to remember, but that's a lot of information. So give me the bottom line, Jonah. Tell me what I need to think about here. So first two things, soil disturbance and impervious surface area. Questions ask, what is the amount of soil surface area, which will be disturbed? We're not looking at cubic area. We're not looking at cut and fill. We're only looking at soil surface disturbance. And impervious area, what is the total amount of impervious surface area created and or being replaced? And a couple numbers to remember. 1 acre and 5,000 square feet. These are my triggers. So I'm always looking, hey, is it above or below an acre? Is it triggering a SWPPP or is it triggering an erosion sediment control plan? Is it above or below 5,000 square feet? And if it's below, then I have to remember that half of that. But those are the trigger numbers. It's pretty easy to remember, 1 in 5,000. I think you guys can remember that. And then also remember 50% if it's a redevelopment project, because that affects what area needs to be treated. And if you can help a developer save time and money in their planning process, and with all these requirements, they are going to love you for it. So if you don't get anything else, remember this, because this will be a quick tip checklist for you to remember. That's what triggers it. Now, what goes into a full, complete submittal for one of these plans? Well, for an erosion sediment control plan, we need basic project information, and it needs to be, or I like it to be on a plan sheet that I can see who the contractor is, who the builder is, or who the project owner is, who the contractor is, start and end dates, project size, soil disturbance, 2 different figures. Project size is the whole area where they might be staging, where they're going to keep work, where they're going to be accessing, and then soil disturbance is the actual area where they're going to be disturbing soil. And then obviously project location. Where are they doing the work? Need to know all of those things for an erosion sediment control submittal. They need to select minimum BMPs. And remember, I said this is based off of our ordinance, and our ordinance lists several categories, but these 6 are the following categories that are required to be addressed. Now, it is erosion and sediment controls, waste management BMPs, non-stormwater BMPs, and good housekeeping BMPs. Now, if you caught that, I said 6 because I can't count. There's actually 5 there, and I'm just realizing this as I'm presenting. So forgive that error. 5 categories, not 6. Forgive me for that. So anyway, they need to meet these categories here. And how they address that is usually we will give them in our erosion sediment control plan a list of BMPs to meet that they can use. They might have some descriptions of what those BMPs do if they are not familiar with these, but we try to use the industry standards. We try to use Casca BMP cut sheets, which we say, hey, you can go and look those up and look for references of cut sheets. You can use the Caltrans cut sheets if you want to. Look up these references and implement them on your project if you don't know what they are. And so last thing that needs to be required, it's very important. It's probably one of the number one reasons I turn away a plan is you also need a site-specific BMP map showing locations where the selected BMPs are going to be implemented. And some other things that you need to be included are like access areas, staging areas, areas where the work is actually going to take place, and a vicinity map as well. But a site-specific BMP map with just some small narrative saying we're going to do this here, we're going to put that control there, this is where we are accessing. It's all important and imperative to be included in a submittal. Case in point in this, I had an ESCP I was reviewing, and they just provided a plan sheet, and they had some BMPs on there, but not a lot of BMPs. And they said, on this fence line, we're going to be accessing, we're going to take out the fence, we're going to access here. And I was like, okay, but there's nothing else on the plan. It's just the plot plan and then an access area. So I said, okay, well, let me go on Google Earth and see what that location is, because I think there would be a neighbor there. So when I get on Google Earth, I look, and they're basically going to track through somebody's field, an open field, through all of this exposed soil to take out a fence and then access the backyard of this house. I was like, whoa, none of that was in the project scope. That's, in another additional 1,000 square feet of project area that you need to consider. Excuse me. So things like that, it's important to look and make sure all of those details are actually described in the erosion sediment control plan, because trust me, while it might not be disturbing soil, you're still going to be driving through unstabilized soil in a bare field, and that has potential for needing erosion sediment control plans. So having a site-specific map that has detailed locations of BMP implementations is imperative. Otherwise, you won't know what is actually going on in the project. So what goes into a SWP submittal? Well, remember I said this is similar to an ESCP. A SWP is an ESCP in spirit. So we need, guess what? Basic project information. Very similar to the ESCP with a few additions. You need a couple other things included, like who a QSP is, where site documents are going to be located on site, things like that. More contact information, that type of thing. Because they are larger projects, they are more involved. There's just a little bit more information that needs to go in there. But you still need the same 5 categories, not 6 categories, of BMPs met. And the review process is extremely similar. You need these 3 basic things. So project information, start and end dates, location, areas of soil disturbance, the 5 BMP categories, how they're going to be implemented on site, and then the selection of SWP maps, vicinity and BMP details of how it's practically going to be implemented on the site. All 3 of those things are imperative, but also soil loss calculations, which are your risk determination worksheets. Those need to be included as well. And we don't necessarily review them, but we will look them over and make sure that it's done correctly if we need them. If we feel like, hey, this project is saying it's a risk 1, and I think it should be a risk 2 because most projects are risk 2. So I need to have some verification of how they got that risk level here, as well as proof of permit coverage. So they need to, if it's a CGP SWP, they need to show that they have a notice of intent or a WDID number. And it doesn't need to be done on the first submittal, but definitely before they receive their building or grading permit, they need to provide a WDID number or notice of intent to show they have gotten the actual permit coverage. And then they also need to show any other proof of applicable coverage, like a 401, 404 permits, a low threat discharge for groundwater or hydrostatic testing permit, Department of Fish and Game, Section 1600, those types of things. They're not always going to be required, but they may be required. So it's important to know this might not be the only permit that needs to be taken in to show that they have coverage. So those are the things that go into a SWP submittal. A few more than an ESCP, but those are the basics. So what goes into a small post-construction plan? Well, this is a 3-step process, and this is probably going to be the easiest one to talk about today. The one after this is a little bit heady, but first step here, pick one or more site design measures. I've used that word a lot, and what that is there are 8 site design measures that we are allowed to use, which you can see there, like soil quality improvement and maintenance, tree planting, porous pavement. These are measures that are designed to infiltrate, evapotranspirate, bioretain, stormwater runoff from our project. We need to pick one or more. And it's important because if we're picking one or more, does this mean, hey, I'm planting a couple trees on my project? Does that mean I can select tree planting preservation and that's my one site design measure? Yes, of course. It's really easy for small projects to meet these standards. And remember, they are 25,000 to 5,000 square feet. So these are like single family homes, or maybe a well house, or a new well tank. Pretty easy to meet these site design measures. So tree planting, that could be your go-to. But if you want to do something like a green roof, go for it. Or porous pavement, go for it. They might be a little bit more involved. You might need to show some documentation, a little bit more documentation, but you pick one or more and show what you're using. And now move on to step 2, which is quantify the runoff reduction. It's like, okay, well, I knew there had to be a catch. It had to be difficult at some point, right? This is a stormwater requirement we're talking about. Well, guess what? There is no goal or minimum amount required. This step is completely informational. And so there's a couple of tools that will be part of your post-construction plan. Either an Excel tool provided by the Water Board or the Smarts version of that calculator tool. And I prefer the Smarts version because the Excel has some known issues in quantifying its figures that they don't update it anymore. They only update the Smarts version. And excuse me. While Smarts is a little bit more involved, I prefer to use it because I know it's going to give me better results and more consistent results. Usually the issues with the credits are related to soil quality quantifications. It doesn't quite calculate them correctly, but it's still usable. You can still use it. Jurisdictions will still accept it. I just prefer the digital version, or the Smarts version to it. But all you have to do is go on, plug your project information in, pick your pre-construction input, your post-construction input. There you can see, and what site design measures you're selecting, and then beep, bop, boop, put that information in. And now what do you do with it? Well, you just print it out and include it with the submittal. It's just informational. There's no goal. Even if you don't meet a runoff reduction, you're just providing, saying this is what we've done. And that's what you need for a small project. So to prepare the submittal, you need completed post-construction worksheets, which are usually on a municipality's website, or you just hand that to the applicant, say, fill this out. Site plans showing where site design measures are selected. And you might need to have some engineering stamps on them if they are falling under one of these categories. So rooftop impervious area disconnection, porous pavement, rain barrels, they need to have a civil PE stamp of approval. Green roofs, or if there's other structural aspects to some other part of a collection system, need to have a stamp from a structural engineer. If stream setbacks or soil quality improvements or vegetated swales are selected, you need to have a licensed landscape architect stamp the plans. And finally, after you get all the necessary stamps, a copy of the results page from the Excel or Smarts calculator. And that's it. That's your small project. You submit that, we review it. Yep, you did all those 3 things. Check, 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 and you're good to go. Now, what goes into a regulated post-construction plan? Brace yourself because we are going to get in the weeds here. So we double the steps. We have 6 steps now. And the first thing we're going to do is specify drainage management areas. What are the areas we're going to look at for our runoff? Because instead of taking the whole site, we're going to break it up into different pieces for where each area will run off in different directions and then treat those differently. Now, you can treat the whole site if you're going to a retention or bioretention basin. You can treat the whole site. It's one DMA. If you're using different control methods in different areas, then you'll need to specify if it's broken up, and you'll need to submit different worksheets for each DMA. It's a little bit complicated, but once you do it a few times, you get it. Now, also for each DMA, you need to identify the applicable source controls. Now, this comes from a list in the phase 2 permit. There's 18 source controls. I did count that one correctly. I verified it. But there's 18 source controls that you'll have to look at, which will say, are you doing loading and unloading operations? Do you have refuse areas? Are you going to be doing pesticide application in these areas? So if you know any of those things are going to be part of the final design of the project, you'll check those boxes saying, yes, we will implement BMPs for these controls. If those aren't applicable, you say, no, nope. So once you do that for each DMA, remember it needs to be done for each DMA. Now we need to talk about how low impact development design standards are going to be incorporated into each DMA. Again, it's easy if you can do one whole DMA, you're only doing it once, but if you're breaking it up into several, it needs to be done for each DMA. Now, it might be the same across the site, but it does need to be submitted separately. So these are 9 LID standards, again, found in section E12E, this time of the permit. They are, how is the project going to limit impervious surface creation, or how is the project going to promote infiltration, those types of questions. You need to answer all of those, just a narrative section, and then move on to now selecting and sizing site design and treatment control measures. So we select one or more treatment facilities, is what I like to call them, that will either infiltrate, evapotranspire, harvest and reuse, or biotreat stormwater runoff. And so that might seem like a big, scary word. It might seem like, what am I doing here? This is crazy. But think of it like a vegetated swale, a retention basin, underground infiltration area, those types of things. So those need to be selected, and then they need to be able to meet the goals, the runoff goals for the project. And also, for another requirement for projects that are over an acre, again, 1 acre, it's good to remember, you need to incorporate measures to prevent runoff from exceeding the pre-project flow rate for a 2-year, 24-hour storm event after you apply your credits. So that's like tree planting, all those other credits that you can use to reduce your runoff goals. Then anything over that or remaining needs to not exceed the pre-project flow rate for a 2-year, 24-hour storm event. This is called hydromodification. It's a little bit heady to get into, but essentially the goal of this is, for those larger projects, they want to meet or exceed that pre-project flow rate. So imagine you have a flat acre of undeveloped land, and then you put a slab and a warehouse on it. That warehouse and slab need to reflect what the vegetated field was doing for hydromodification, or before hydromodification occurred. That's the idea behind it. And so you can do that after credits are applied, but that is something to remember for projects that are over an acre. They need to identify those as well. So that's a lot. I understand that. Now we come to preparing the submittal. What needs to go into the full submittal? Completed regulated post-construction worksheets, a couple more pages that are added onto that, depending on what standards plan you're using. Separate site plans and worksheets for each DMA, and a key to show how each DMA plays in with each other and where it's located is extremely helpful. Design drawings for the proposed treatment control measures. So if you're giving me a project saying you're going to use underground infiltration, well, I need to see some engineering drawings to show how you've designed it, how big it is, how much area, how you're using it, how it's being piped over. I need to have design drawings showing treatment control measures. A copy of results page from the Excel or Smarts calculator still, because that's going to be showing us our runoff goals. And then calculations stamped by the appropriate licensed individual. Same requirements as the small projects for each DMA and control measures that require specifically flow-based sizing criteria. Those need to be included in the submittal. Okay, you made it through the weedy part. Good job, guys. So what happens when a project is complete? Well, there's a few things to close out a permit that you'll want to remember. And it mostly deals with erosion sediment control plans. So a final inspection needs to be performed before a project can be finalized and closed out. And those final inspections are to verify all BMPs are removed and soil disturbance is stabilized. Now for a small project, they just need that inspection and then they are good to go. Final permit closed out, no more inspections, we're good. Have a nice day. Now SWPPs need to have a final inspection, but they also need to submit a notice of termination for their permit coverage on smarts. Now again, we don't regulate that, but I do try to help developers out and say, hey, remember, you got permit coverage on smarts, you have to pay annual fees to the state. If you're done with your project, file your notice of termination so you don't get charged fees for a couple of years of late reports because you didn't close out your project when you were done. And to receive their notice of termination, they need to, and this is very important because this is a new requirement that's been around for a couple of years that isn't a part of any permit language. This is just something we found from having notices of terminations rejected and working with different municipalities. Developers need to receive a copy of the executed O&M agreement, operations and maintenance agreement, from the municipality. And I can't believe I didn't mention it on the other page, but for regulated projects, it is imperative to include an O&M plan saying how the owner, not the developer, but how the owner after construction is going to be responsible for following this document to make sure these controls actually continue to work through the lifetime that they are on a project until they are gone or redeveloped or the building is just completely turned to sand. They need to have a plan saying we are going to maintain these control measures until end of time. So you need that plan and you need that submitted along with the original submittal to make it a complete submittal. I'm sorry, I forgot that. And then a statement of responsibility that's going to be accepted and recorded by the municipality and recorded with the county. It's an agreement entered into by the city and the project owner, whoever's going to be taking ownership of the project after construction is completed, not the developer, because the developer will sign it and then they'll sell it to somebody else and won't tell them, hey, you have to do these things. You have to do the O&M. So make sure you get along with the owner and the owner has a signed statement of responsibility saying, yes, I agree, I will take care of these control measures, because they will not receive a notice of termination with the state for their permits if they do not have a signed copy for this. So it's very important to have these O&M documents. It's very important to remember to have them submitted, make sure they're accurate, make sure the person who is entered into this agreement is the person who is the owner. I've gotten into some headaches with a few of those projects where owners changed hands and they don't want to take it. Make sure it's done. So again, a lot of information. I understand that. Thanks for hanging in there. Hope you learned something, but if you didn't, here's a summary that you can take a picture of, print it out on your wall saying, this is what I need to remember. So what was it? Pay attention to soil disturbance and impervious surface area figures. Remember those 1 acre thresholds and 5,000 square foot thresholds, greater than 1 acre, less than 1 acre, greater than 5,000 square feet, less than 5,000 square feet. Those are going to be your trigger thresholds to remember. Ensure all your submittals are complete. You need the relevant project information. Who's the owner? Where is it located? What are the start dates? How much soil area is going to be disturbed? You need the BMP maps and make sure your BMP selections meet the minimum standards laid out by your municipal ordinances. Again, if you don't know what those are, take some time after this workshop. Go look up erosion control ordinance in your municipal ordinances. Read through those, see what those minimum standards are, and just refresh yourself on what those are. And then finally, ensure O&M documentation is provided, executed, and returned to the developer or the owner. Sometimes the developer is the owner, but the project owner, whoever's going to be responsible for it, with their final permit. So with that ends this workshop. Thank you so much. And if there's any questions, we'll have some time for that while I take a drink of water.
Hi, Jonah. How's it going?
Good. How are you?
Good. So for the small PCSP projects, one of the things you said that you needed was a complete post-construction worksheet. I was just wondering if that was the stormwater intake forms or is that something different?
Yeah. Remind me, what municipality do you work for?
City of El Cajon.
City of El Cajon.
Yeah.
Okay. Hi, Paris. So I'm not familiar with how you guys do it down there, but that sounds probably correct. If you have a post-construction standards plan, which has forms in it, then yeah, if you're using those forms, that's what I'm referring to. It's essentially just a worksheet that says, this is my project, this is my area. These are the site design measures I'm selecting, and then what their runoff goal numbers are for those.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah. Any other questions? All right. Well, I think that ends it for me. Thanks so much for hanging out with me today and learning about these things. If you have any other questions or something comes up, feel free to email me, give me a call. I'm happy to help out. We're a little busy right now, but I will get back to you as soon as I can. So thanks so much for joining, everybody, and you all have a great day.